Today we are going to tackle the topic of testing. I know you guys have been asking me for this video, so here we go. I'm going to be talking about some of the tests that I'm familiar with, like the CAT-5, Terra, Peabody, Iowa. I'm going to show you how to interpret those scores, understand those scores, what they mean, and what they mean to you as a parent, but it can actually be for anyone who wants to interpret those scores. We're also going to be talking about, like I said, some of those acronyms and those vocabulary words, so this is just going to be jam-packed of a lot of information. So my name is Leilani. I am a former public and private school teacher, and now I am a homeschool mom to 4 wonderful kids. And I do homeschool consultations, but I also do homeschool evaluations, portfolio reviews, and testing for homeschool kids. So let's just jump right into this because it's a lot of information, and I want to make sure I can explain it to you clear enough where you can make some really good informed decisions on what tests to give your child and how to interpret them. So we're going to start with the CAT-5, which is actually an older test, but a lot of homeschool families swear by this test. They want to use it, so they go back to it, and I get it. There is an updated version of the CAT-5, and so the CAT-5 actually is California Achievement Test. But the new one, it's also called the CAT-6, and it's really not that new, but it's also known as the Terra. So I'm going to talk about the difference between those two, but let me focus on the CAT-5. So first of all, both of those tests are Scantron tests, and it's timed. So your kid is going to sit there with the Scantron and a booklet, and they're going to do all the bubbles, and it is timed. It is also not one of those tests that if you leave the answers blank, it's for your benefit. So you want your child to obviously try to fill in as much as they can with the answers. The child is tested on reading, and that's going to include reading vocabulary and reading comprehension. They're also going to be scored on mathematics, and the subcategories are mathematics, computation, the mathematic concepts and problems. So when they have the mathematics computation, this one is timed, and the kid has to be able to recall and remember facts, math facts, very, very quickly, and do these math problems very, very quickly. It doesn't really show you what they know or don't know about mathematics. It's all about speed and accuracy for those. So when you are looking at the math computation, and this is exactly the same thing for the Iowa, it's about speed and accuracy. But then they're going to combine those two together to give you a total math. So the next one is total language, and then you have language mechanics, and then you have language usage and structure, and then you have language spelling. So that is the total. It's called a battery. If you ever hear that word, that whole thing is the whole battery, the whole test, if that kind of gives you an answer. So another word that you want to be aware of, that word is norm. And that's when you're going to be comparing students of the same age or grade to your child, and it's based on a percentage. Whenever I explain it to a parent, I always say, okay, you know when you took your baby to the doctor and then they gave you a percentile? Well, it's exactly the same kind of thing. If your child is in the 50 percentile, they're like average weight and average height. But if they're in the 80th percentile for weight, okay, you might want to be concerned a little bit, or maybe they're just really big boned. But if they're like 10 percentile, that's really scary because they're really, really thin, and you have to be concerned there too. So it's based off of other kids at that age. So you have the raw score. That's the first thing that you're going to see on your scores when you get them back. And for all of the tests, the raw score really doesn't mean anything to you, so just skip over it. It's basically saying, look, there were 42 problems on the test, they got 40 right. It means absolutely nothing. Don't even try to percentile it out either, because because they don't, you don't, there's no need for it, okay? So the next one is the grade equivalent part. So when you're looking at the grade equivalent, you're going to see something like 1.1 or 2.5. What is that 0.5? What is that 0.1? Okay, so here's how it works. 1 is going to represent first grade. That 0.1 represents the first month in first grade, which is usually like August, September, right? So if you have like 1.5, you can do like September, October, November, December, January. So it's somewhere around January. So that gives you their grade equivalent. Now, it's a little deceiving on how to interpret that grade equivalent. If they are below grade level, all that really means is there is a gap in their learning. So in other words, they took the test and let's say they're in 5th grade and they scored like a 3.5 and you're like, oh wow, that's not good. That sounds awful that they're a 3rd grader. And that's not how it works. Don't do that. It just means that somewhere along that learning path, they have a little gap. So let's say it's math. Maybe they really, for some reason, struggled with percentages. Okay? That there you go. You're going to miss all the questions for percentages, and that's going to show up in that grade equivalent score. The problem, though, is I do not believe the CAT-5 will show you that in the scores, like where that child is lacking. Now, the Iowa sort of kind of does, but not really. And then when you get to the Peabody, that one's actually administered by a teacher face-to-face. And the teacher can literally tell you they had a gap with this. And they will tell you if you get a good administrator. So let's go back to the CAT-5. So if it is above grade level, so let's say they're taking the 5th grade test and they scored like a 7.8, okay? It doesn't mean that you can skip a grade. It's just meaning that they're understanding their concepts. And you will actually see that reflected in the percentiles. So that's when you get to the percentiles that I was talking about earlier, where you can kind of compare it with the norms. And it's like going to the doctor and getting a percentile of your baby's height and weight, okay? So let's say that on your grade equivalent form, you have a 3rd grader and they scored 5.1, okay? Look at the percentiles, because the percentiles might actually show them at a 50%, which means they are right there with all their peers, right in the average area. 50% of the kids aren't going to be skipping up to 5th grade. You want to look at the percentiles to get an idea of where they fall among their peers at their grade level, not from the grade equivalent. It just means that they're understanding the concepts really, really well, and they're doing a great job. Don't skip a grade if it says that they're in 11th grade, even though they're in 8th. Does that make sense? Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section about this. It can be a little bit deceiving, but if you understand that grade equivalent is there to kind of just show you where the gaps are and if they understand the concept well. But the percentile is really where you want to look, because that's comparing them to other students their age. So Stanines are usually between the numbers of 1 and 9, and it's kind of going to, it does, not kind of, rank your kids as below average, average, above average, etc. So 1 is going to be the lowest, and 9 is going to be the highest. 5 is average. So whenever you see the Stanine, that's kind of what it means. It's not a grade. It's just a 1 through 9. Where do they fit on the scale of above average, average, below average in that topic? For the CAT-5 specifically, you want to make sure you order the test level for the grade level your child is going into. So if they finished up 6th grade, you want to order the 7th grade test level. If they finished up 8th grade, you want to order the 9th grade level. So that's how CAT-5 works. Of course, that means if you are starting 6th grade, you want to order the 6th grade test. So let's look at the Terra, which is the CAT-5 updated. So what's nice about this one is it was actually normed in 2005. That's good to know. They actually normed it for 3 different time periods. So we have the fall, mid-year, and spring. And so when they actually do the percentiles, they gather the information from you saying, you know, are you taking it in the spring? Are you taking it in mid-year? Or taking it at the beginning of the year? And then comparing you with those kids to get the percentiles. So with the Terra, good thing to know, it is a nationally normed achievement test. That means they are norming it against kids nationwide, and it's based on achievement. So you can order these tests online. You can actually borrow them. They will ship them to your house. You could administer right there in your living room. You can spread out the sections over a few days. You have 2 weeks to do it. You have to turn it back in. Seton is a great one that you can order from. There are different ones actually that you can order with the Terra. You've got the complete battery, but then you also have the survey. And the survey just means that it's shorter, first of all, because they only take a little bit from each of the topics that I'm going to mention in a second. It's a survey, a shorter test with the same topics. Complete battery is like the full test. So the topics that the Terra Nova Cat 6 covers is going to be reading. That's word analysis, vocabulary, then you've got language. You've got language usage, language mechanics, spelling. Then mathematics, you got the math computation again. That's one that I mentioned before about Cat 5, where it is timed and it's all about how quick and how accurate you are on answering those questions. And then the problem solving and concepts. Now, there's science and also social studies. There is a plus test that you can order. All this means is that you're going to get some additional math and reading and language arts, and it's completely optional and up to you. You can order the plus test with the complete battery or the plus test with the survey, completely up to you. You also want to make sure you check if you are homeschooled. You want to check with your county if they prefer one over the other. If you have to turn in test scores to your county, make sure you pick the right test that fits. So with this test, same thing is going to be true. You're going to get the raw scores, you're going to get the grade equivalents, you're going to get the percentiles, and you're going to get the Stanines. You do notice that it's updated because it's the Cat 5 Terra Nova. And this test will actually take between 4.5 hours to 5.5 hours. It's a really long test. And that's why it's actually really nice to split it up between a few days. But I have been able to test kids over that 5 period. I tell them to sleep and eat a good breakfast. So that's the Terra Nova, Cat 6. Like I said, the only difference is it is the updated version of the Cat 5. So next we're going to talk about the Iowa, and that's IOWA. And it is an achievement test. So this one is actually based on levels. So you've got kindergarten, which is level 5 or 6. First grade, level 6 or 7 at the end of the year, and so forth and so on. 11th grade and 12th grade are actually the same test, which is level 17 and 18. So this one is based on levels, and you want to make sure wherever you order it from, you look at the chart to make sure it matches up with your child's actual grade and level. What's unique about the Iowa too is that grades K through 3 will actually get a book that's a consumable, and they write on that. Grades 4 through 12 will get a Scantron, and they bubble in that. The K through 3 bubbles in, but it's consumable. What does the Iowa actually test? It's going to be vocabulary, reading. K through 2nd grade will do language, and K through 3rd grade will do listening. There is word analysis for K through 3rd grade, written expression for grades 3 through 12, punctuation for 3rd through 8th grade, spelling for 3rd through 8th grade, math concepts and computation. So those are the 2 subtests for math. It's the same idea: computation, speed, and accuracy. And then concepts, it's concepts. And then there is science and social studies. So as you can see, different grade levels have different tests. And that's important to note because the longest test out of all of them actually is the 3rd grade test. And the high school test is actually, I think, the shortest there is out there. So just food for thoughts. There is an optional CogAT, that's Form 7. It has verbal analogy, sentence completion, verbal classification, number analogies, puzzle series, figure, matrix, paper folding, and classification. So this one's just a little bit extra. Once again, check with your state to make sure that you don't need that or do need that, because if you don't need that, don't order that. Take the shorter test, because that's just going to give you more time test taking, unless you want it, because some people may want to see how their child scores in those areas. So that is the Iowa. It is going to score the same way with the raw score and then the grade equivalency and the percentiles and the Stanine. It's the same idea. Pretty much all of these tests are going to have the same kind of ideas. And if they, and this has happened where people will give them 2 of these tests and you compare the scores to see how similar and alike and different they are. And people do that a lot. In fact, the next test that I'm going to talk about, which is the P-body, a lot of people will call it PIAT because there are different P-bodies out there. But the PIAT is the P-body individual achievement test. They do have a revised version, which sounds nice and fancy, but that revised version happened in 1980. Happened in 1989. They don't actually sell this one anymore, so it's really hard to find a teacher that will administer it. I have the test. I just thought I threw that out there. But the good news is that this test, the reason it is so popular among homeschoolers is that there is a teacher administering it, and the teacher, from experience, is able to pick out certain things and then share with the parent afterwards the things that they noticed. A lot of parents that have kids with learning disabilities and special needs and test anxiety, they will do the PIAT. They will. Especially if it's a teacher that the family's familiar with. They will do the Peabody. If there are also, and there has been situations where while testing the Peabody, there are some red flags that you can kind of tell that this child might have a learning disability. It will not diagnose a learning disability. Ever, ever, ever. And nor should the teacher ever use this test to diagnose disability. There are other tests to do that. But what it can do is say, hey, you might want to look into this and get your child tested for this so you can see if this is the problem, and then you can finally make some adjustments and modifications in your curriculum to help you with this learning disability. So, and that's happened to me a few times, actually, where I have been able to give the Peabody and I start seeing things that I notice. And to be honest, whenever you're working with a child, if the teacher is experienced in understanding those learning disabilities, just by working with the child, they're gonna come out. So it's really about the test evaluator, the test proctor, than it is about the actual test. So in the Peabody, it is for ages 5 through 22, and of course grades kindergarten through high school. It's all grades. And the idea of this test, very different from the Iowa and the CAT and the Terra. This one's different because you keep giving the test until the child can no longer answer the questions anymore. And if you want to be very specific, is they get 5 wrong out of 7. And it's all oral too. So the teacher is literally reading you the questions off the paper and you have to answer. And even math, like the teacher will read the question to them and then they answer the question. And it's all multiple choice with math, by the way. Not with the questions, though. The question is you give an oral answer back to the teacher. So what's actually tested, general information, that's the one where the teacher will ask them a question and they have to answer it back. And then you have reading recognition. That's where you see words, and they literally just have to read the words. So it's phonics. And then there is reading comprehension, which is my favorite part of the test, where you are given a sentence, they have to read it, and then you flip the page and they have to pick out one picture out of the 4 that the sentence matches. There's also mathematics, and that's very, it's just all of mathematics. It's not about speed and accuracy because this one is not timed at all. The PIAT is not timed. All right. And then there's spelling. That one is also multiple choice where you are given a word verbally and you have to pick out which word is spelled correctly out of 4. And then there is the optional written expression. And that is very unique because K through 1st grade, it's focusing on actual handwriting. And then 2nd through 12th grade, it's focused on writing a story based on a picture. Now the rubric for both of those, the handwriting one is great. The one for the written expression with the writing picture, the picture that you have to write about, it's so broad. It's not my favorite, but it's very broad, the rubric, because they're looking for punctuation, capitalization. Of course, they're not looking for spelling because you already tested spelling. So how do you actually interpret and read the Peabody or the PIAT? Because it's a little bit different than the others, but very, very similar in that you get the raw score. You get the grade equivalents, and you get the percentiles, and then you get the Stanines. That's all the same. But then with the written expression, this is where it's different. The written expression, when they give you a score, they're going to combine your spelling raw score and your raw score from the rubric. They're going to combine that to come up with a percentile. and a Stanine. That's all you get. You don't even get a grade equivalent for the written expression. You just get a percentile, which is great. So that's pretty much the Peabody. Now let's talk about why you would use these tests and what are you going to do with this information. So first of all, there's a lot of states out there that require testing for homeschool students in the state. I highly recommend that you go and find out which ones. There's a list. I'm sure there's a list somewhere. Figure out which ones you can take. Make sure you know the exact type of test you are going to order, or if you have to have a teacher administer it. Find out that information. Also understand a lot of them with the raw score, the percentiles, and the grade equivalent, it's the same kind of idea, and the Stanines, same kind of idea. So even though I just explained 4 different tests, for the most part, it's going to be the same thing across the board. I do know that the Iowa, for example, at the bottom of the page will give you some more details on, like they'll have science, but you know, they'll say biology, and then they'll say physical science, I think. I can't remember all the ones exactly within the science realm, but I know history is like geography. I'm sorry, social studies has like geography and history, and it'll tell you which ones they did better and worse at. So they'll give you a little bit of a guide onto which areas are weak and which ones are strong. The PIAT is more the teacher will just tell you just straight up where the holes were. But anyway, make sure you find out which test and pick and, you know, go by what your state says. So that's one reason somebody would choose to do these tests. Another thing that people use these tests for is to, well, another one is they will test their kids right before they send them back to public school to figure out, you know, grade levels. And sometimes, you know, it's different for every state, different for every school. It's really up to the guidance counselor, and that's something that you have to talk to the guidance counselor about. Should I get my child tested, or do you want to take my word for it, or do you want to test my child? So those are conversations that you need to have with the school guidance counselor. But a lot of parents that are homeschooled, they will take these tests and use them to help decide whether or not they want to have them skip a grade or stay a grade back, or where their weak spots. So the first thing is, obviously, with any test, you don't want to determine where your child is grade level and how smart your child is based on test scores, because it's a snapshot of one day. They could be having a bad day. They could be having a great day. It doesn't really give you a full picture of how much your child knows and doesn't know. What it does do is give you a rough idea. You know, maybe there's some gaps here and there on what areas you may want to pick up the following year. So let's say, for example, you get your test scores back and they did really good in math, they're on track, they're doing great. Yay, your math curriculum is working. They're doing really great at language arts, they're reading really well. Yay, your language arts curriculum is reading, but their science is really low. Oh, their history is really low. So you're like, okay, you know what? Maybe we should work a little bit more on those 2 subjects. But here's another thing with science and history too, as a homeschool. You know, as a homeschool community, okay? Who's to say what science needs to be learned when? See? Do you see what I'm getting at, right? For example, I know there's a curriculum out there, Apologia, is going to focus on unit studies. That the first year, they may do astronomy, and then the second year, botany, and then the third year, they're doing birds and bats and insects, and then 4th grade, they're doing marine life and science with oceans and earth. And so, do you see what I'm saying? It's unit study. It's not a general overview of all science. And these nationally normed tests, or these achievement tests, they're going to be testing on a survey of all the different sciences, and your child may have never learned that science yet. So why are you, why would you want to decide whether or not your child knows much about science based on a test that's not really testing them on the things they do or do not know? So science and history are kind of tricky, because it really depends on how you're teaching them and what curriculum. Right, so another one like Matthew C is another good example that I use. So Matthew C does not go alongside the benchmarks and the testing. It doesn't. A lot of kids that are brilliant at math get on these tests, they'll take the test, their math scores are really, really low. It's because they're not testing the same thing. So that's also something to be very leery of. Now, sometimes, like I said, these tests aren't going to work, and sometimes they do. The best way to determine what grade level your child is in order to pick out the right curriculum for them to use is by going to the curriculum that you want to use, their website, and finding a way to test for their level. That's the best way to figure it out. A test, a nationally normed or achievement test, it's a guide. That's all it is. And don't put too much into it, if you know what I'm saying. You're comparing your kids to the standards that are created by the education system and not by you, the parent. And as a parent of a homeschool child, you are the ones that determine the standards. So, for example, let's just say science and history. You haven't spent, as a parent, you have not spent much time in science and history. You have been focused on reading good literature out there, but maybe you're really focused on Bible. A lot of homeschool parents are. They're focused on Bible, understanding those, reading and comprehending those things. That's what you're focused on. You're not reading science books, you're not reading history books as much because you want to lay that foundation. So you get your test scores back and those are low. Of course they're going to be low. But that doesn't determine what grade your child's in or how smart they are. A lot of parents will also come to me and they will say, help me prepare my child for this test. Why? I don't understand the logic behind that. I understand, if you want to get a good score to continue your homeschooling in your state, but is the state really going to take away your right to homeschool? I mean, that's a whole nother conversation that I do know does happen, and I get that for teaching to the test. But if you are taking the test and you're just wanting scores for your benefit, why would you teach the test if you know that the score is not really going to determine anything except your information? You want a clean picture of what's going on. It's very difficult. There's a lot of debate on whether to use testing or good, and this is a debate that can go on and on. And I feel like I just kind of like chipped off the top of the iceberg with this whole conversation. And you guys can go in the comments if you want to and have this conversation, or we could have a live about it, But it's a tough one because every single homeschool parent has their own opinion. They have their own. And a lot of it is political. They have their own political opinion on all of this. And a lot of it comes down to your foundation on your faith, too. So I'm not really going to touch on it much anymore here because I'm not. Sorry. But what I am going to do is refer you to the comments down below. And if you have any questions on any of this stuff that I brought up, the technical side of things, please leave those questions down in the comments down below. And until then, check out some of my other videos where I talk about specifically Florida state laws. This is an old one, but it's a really good one. That's why I haven't remade it yet. And I'll put a surprise one here that'll be good for you guys to check out. So thank you guys again for watching this video, and I will hopefully see you guys in my next video. Bye.